Krystal, what are you taking a look at today?
Well, as I was saying, there are new questions this morning about just how involved the FBI, again, may have been in hatching a plot to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer that they then disrupted with much fanfare. Here's the background here. You will recall in October of last year, the news media exploded with what was truly a sensational story. Right-wing extremists outraged over pandemic lockdowns had been narrowly thwarted in an attempt to kidnap the governor. That's what we were told. Remember this? Storming the state capitol, instigating a civil war, abducting a sitting governor ahead of the presidential election. Those were among the plots described by federal and state officials in Michigan on Thursday as they announced terrorism, conspiracy, and weapons charges against 13 men. At least 6 of them, officials said, had hatched a detailed plan to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer, a Democrat who has become a focal point of anti-government views and anger over coronavirus control measures. That was the report from the New York Times. Now, of course, that narrative really fit the moment. Trump had been going after Whitmer in recent weeks. Tensions were extraordinarily high heading into the November election. In her press conference after the plot was revealed, Whitmer actually blamed Trump for inciting these domestic terrorists. Very quickly, there were some signs that maybe the narrative wasn't quite as clear-cut as the government and media were portraying it. Those warning signs were explained in a now prescient piece by Branko Marcetic, who warned that maybe, just maybe, the FBI was, quote, up to its old Obama-era tricks, helping manufacture the very terrorist plots it ends up thwarting and then publicizing. In particular, Marcetic drew some parallels between this action against right-wing extremists and how the government targeted young Muslim men for entrapment. He noted, for example, that while during the War on Terror, the government would frequently go after the poor or even the developmentally disabled for their entrapment schemes. The supposed ringleader of the Michigan kidnapping plot also seemed to really be at the margins of society. In this case, the alleged head terrorist, a guy named Adam Fox, is very poor. He was nearly homeless. He was living temporarily in the basement of a vacuum store where he held a meeting, supposedly, quote, masterminding this plot. Marcetic also noted that, as was often the case with the Muslim men the FBI entrapped, the accused didn't really seem to have the financial wherewithal to carry out their evil plans without the help of government money. An undercover agent told that ringleader Fox that explosives would cost about $4,000. There is zero indication that the men involved had come close to pooling together that amount of money. Finally, Marcetic noted the extensive use of confidential informants in War on Terror entrapment. By 2017, 83% of ISIS-related cases involved undercover agents or informants. Well, now, we are learning much more about just how extensive the government's use of confidential informants was in the Michigan kidnapping plot. New court filings in the case suggest the government used at least 12 informants in connection with disrupting this plot. 12. So just if you're keeping track at home, that's twice as many government informants involved in the plot as there were alleged terrorists. According to an attorney for one of the defendants, quote, the government has shared ID numbers linked to 12 confidential informants, but with one exception, has not provided background on how they were recruited, what payments they might have received from the FBI, where they're based, or what their names are. Now, look, definitely worth keeping in mind here that it is the defense's strategy in this case to argue that the government hatched the plot and entrapped the defendants. So their assertions should absolutely be taken with a grain of salt. But so far, this case is looking a whole lot like the domestic terror version of what was routinely done to destroy Muslim men during the height of the War on Terror. Now, I'm not cherry-picking War on Terror cases here either. Extensive review of such prosecutions by Human Rights Watch found that, quote, many of these people would never have committed a crime if not for law enforcement encouraging, pressuring, and sometimes paying them to commit terrorist acts. The New York Times a few months back detailed how a highly touted disruption of a supposed plot to bomb the busy Herald Square subway stop that was effectively devised and pushed by the government. An FBI informant radicalized a young Muslim man with photos of Abu Ghraib and other U.S. atrocities, helped that young Muslim man conceive of a plan, and then pushed him to act on it. Our hardened terrorist in this case was such a thug that he insisted he needed to check with his mom before he could agree to actually do anything in connection with this government-pushed plot. Why are these tactics and abuses so incredibly common? Well, all the incentives are aligned for the government to want to help create these plots and then make a big show of disrupting them. And that same logic that applies to domestic extremism as it did to international terrorism. Political careers are made by making a big show of disrupting terror plots. What's more, elaborately demonstrating that the world is dangerous and scary. That can be a really effective tool for social control and for claiming even more power for the deep state. Keep the public terrified, keep them on edge, tell them to spy on their neighbors and their family members, keep them glued into cable news and elite media to learn the new explosive details of the latest narrowly avoided terror plot. Fear is powerful. And a scared people, they'll pass the Patriot Act, they'll go along with new wars, they'll accept mass surveillance, they'll desperately search for the next strongman daddy figure to keep them safe. Survival is understandably prized above most other values. Allow me to state the obvious here. I abhor white supremacists, right-wing extremists, and all terrorists who would seek to kill, kidnap, and spread hate. But the very last thing that we need is the government actively fomenting and agitating and creating more extremism or just freaking people out for power and for profit. These government abuses pose a much graver threat to democracy than any of the grand plots that they pretend to disrupt. And Sagar, look, just starting to get the details here. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it, you get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.